The air inside the terminal was restless, voices colliding, footsteps echoing, luggage wheels dragging across the polished floor. She stood still in the middle of it all, as though the chaos hadn't touched her, as though she were carved from silence. A red scarf coiled loosely around her neck fluttered whenever the automatic doors opened, letting in the sharp bite of winter air. Her eyes searched the crowd with the patience of someone who had already waited too long. He was there. She knew it before she truly saw him. The familiar tilt of his shoulders, the careless way he laughed at something his companion whispered, the way his hand reached for hers, her hand once, now someone else's. The woman beside him wore a pale dress that caught the light, her left hand heavy with a ring that still seemed too new to belong. They moved as if the world belonged to them, unscarred and unshaken. Her fingers trembled as she adjusted the scarf, pressing its frayed edge against her lips. The fabric carried the faint scent of him, long washed but never gone, like ghosts that refused to leave. She clutched it tighter, her knuckles white, as if letting go would unravel every reason she had for standing there. No one around her noticed. They rushed, they laughed, they waited for names to be called on intercoms. To them, she was another traveler. To her, this was no departure. It was a return to the edge of a wound. "Don't shake," she whispered under her breath, but the words were swallowed by the murmur of the crowd. Her cracked watch ticked faintly at her wrist, the glass spider-veined from the night everything broke apart. She had never repaired it. Time had stopped the night he lied, but she wore it anyway, a quiet reminder pressing against her skin. For a moment, his gaze swept the room, casual and unaware. She shifted back, slipping into shadow, her breath caught halfway up her throat. If he saw her, if he recognized the outline of her stillness, what then? The suitcase by her feet felt heavier than it should. Not from clothes. Not from books. From something else. Something folded carefully inside, waiting for the right second. Her heart thudded in rhythm with the rolling wheels of departing bags. She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again to watch him lean close, whisper into the new wife's ear, his mouth curved with the same sweetness he once saved for her. And there, standing still while the rest of the world moved forward, she felt the weight of the proof she carried. Not for today. Not for now. But soon the scarf slipped from her grip and she caught it quickly, as though even the floor was unworthy of touching it. She pressed the fabric against her chest, closing her eyes for a second longer than she should. The memory came uninvited. Her father's voice, steady, worn, the kind that belonged to men who had built their lives out of silence. "A person can lose everything, Beatty, but if they hide truth well, it will burn when the right time comes." She had been young when he said it, standing by a half-broken suitcase he refused to throw away. Its leather corners were scuffed, its lock unreliable, but he always called it stronger than pride. Now her suitcase sat by her feet, newer, yet heavy with the same kind of secret weight. Her stomach tightened as laughter rose nearby. A boy ran into his mother's arms, dropping his school bag, his tiny voice squeaking, "Ammy." The woman bent low, tears in her eyes. Another family clapped for a relative returning from abroad, garlands of flowers raised high. Everyone seemed to belong to someone. She pulled the scarf tighter around her neck. The loneliness stung sharper in places where money had failed her before, nights counting coins for rent, mornings going without breakfast so her younger brother could eat. She remembered the letters she never sent, words she couldn't afford to write down because paper felt too permanent, too betraying. And still, through all that, she had carried proof. Folded carefully. Hidden where no one could find it. Proof that he had lied, cheated, broken her in ways invisible but undeniable. Proof that still pulsed like a heartbeat inside her suitcase. She shifted her gaze, and found a stranger watching her. He stood a few feet away, not moving, not pretending. His silence was too exact, too intentional, as if he wanted her to know she was seen but not asked. He didn't smile, didn't frown, his face was patient, almost questioning. She turned quickly away, her pulse spiking, unsure whether she felt exposed or oddly less alone. Her watch ticked once, then seemed to falter, as though mocking her again. She rubbed the cracked glass with her thumb, remembering the night it shattered, his voice, sharp with lies, cutting through everything she believed. A boarding call echoed through the terminal. Families hugged tighter, lovers held on for one last kiss, hands reluctant to separate. She watched as one couple laughed through tears, the woman cupping the man's face as though memorizing him. She wanted to look away but couldn't. Her suitcase handle was cool against her palm. She bent, ready to move, but stopped. He was still in her line of sight, his arm around the woman in the pale dress. Their happiness gleamed like glass in sunlight. For a second, he looked up again. Her breath caught. Her lips curved, not quite a smile, not quite anything else, just hesitation, hanging fragile in the air. The first drop of rain touched the glass wall of the terminal, sliding down like a tear she wished she could claim as her own. The storm outside had been waiting, brewing quietly, and now its patience had ended. Clouds pressed low, heavy and dark, as if echoing everything she hadn't spoken. She gripped the suitcase handle tighter, telling herself to walk, to vanish before her resolve cracked. But then she noticed him again, the stranger who had been watching her without intrusion. His shoes were scuffed, edges peeling, leather tired from too many miles. Not the kind of wear that came from fashion or carelessness, but from necessity. She shifted slightly, catching the glimpse of a photo tucked carelessly into his wallet as he reached for his pocket. It peeked out just enough, a small boy with untamed hair, grinning wide, standing in front of a bicycle too large for him. Her chest tightened. A mirror she hadn't asked for, suddenly placed before her. He too carried weight, different, yet cut from the same fabric of survival. For a brief moment, the scarf around her neck felt like a chain instead of comfort. The cracked watch pressed heavy against her wrist, ticking like a question she could not answer. Her eyes slid back to where he stood, the man she once loved, the man who now smiled at another woman. His laughter rose above the sound of rolling thunder. It cut her, sharp as broken glass. She turned quickly, almost colliding with the stranger. Their eyes met, and in that fleeting silence, she felt stripped bare. He didn't ask her name. He didn't move closer. Yet his gaze spoke as if he already knew the language of the unsaid. "Why do you see me?" She wanted to ask. "Why do I see you?" The rain quickened, drumming against the glass like restless fingers. She thought of her father again, of his quiet strength, of his belief that hidden truths carried their own power. She wondered if the stranger's silence was strength or weakness. Was it fate that had drawn him near, or simply another trick of loneliness, tempting her to trust too soon? Her suitcase felt heavier now, not just with proof, but with the weight of choice. Expose the lie, or let it rot in secrecy. Walk away, or stand still. Forget him, or allow herself to be seen by another man who had his own shadows. The boarding call echoed again. People moved, rushed, parted with hurried goodbyes. She remained rooted. The stranger adjusted his collar, rain streaking the window behind him, and gave her the faintest nod, as if to acknowledge the invisible thread binding their silences. Her breath caught, trembling on the edge of decision. She stepped forward once, then stopped, the sound of thunder swallowing her hesitation. And nothing was answered. Her steps carried her toward the sliding doors, each one heavier than the last. The hiss of rain outside promised erasure, the kind of downpour that could wash away faces, scents, even memories if she let it. She almost welcomed it. Almost. Then, she stopped. Something tugged her back, invisible and merciless. Against her will, she turned for one last look. There he was, her once everything, now someone else's forever, tilting his head close to his new wife as they waited for their boarding call. The pale dress shimmered under harsh fluorescent lights, and in his hand, her breath caught. The red scarf. Not hers, not truly, but identical, folded neatly over his arm. The color blazed like a wound in the sterile light, a cruel echo of what she clutched against her chest. For a moment it felt as if the universe mocked her, mirroring her silence with a reflection she could not shatter. Her fingers tightened around her own scarf, the fabric damp where her palms had sweated. Her cracked watch ticked unevenly, reminding her that time had not healed, it had only circled back, relentless. Some people carry more than just bags, a woman muttered to her child as they shuffled past, casting a quick, judgmental glance. They carry silence. The words pierced. Did she look broken? Did she wear her secrets so plainly that strangers could taste them? She lowered her gaze, heat burning behind her eyes. The stranger, the one with worn shoes and the photo of a boy, was still near. He didn't move closer, didn't ask, yet his quiet presence pressed into her like a question she had no language for. His silence wasn't judgment, it was recognition. Her throat ached. She wanted to scream, to spill the proof hidden in her suitcase across the polished floor, to force the world to see what he had done. But the storm outside beat harder, thunder rolling like suppressed rage, and her voice remained trapped. She swayed slightly, hands trembling, nearly losing grip of the suitcase handle. A passing man frowned, muttering something about drama at airports. A couple nearby glanced at her, whispering low, their expressions half pity, half scorn. Society's quiet verdict was clear: grief was meant to be private, not displayed. She pressed the scarf to her lips, steadying her breath. If she walked away now, the secret would remain hers alone, festering but safe. If she stayed, if she dared, everything could unravel. The boarding gate announcement echoed again. The man she once loved took his wife's hand. Their bodies leaned into each other like a promise. Her knees threatened to buckle, but she did not fall. She stood, silent, trembling, the storm both inside and out. And still, nothing was decided. Her suitcase wheels rattled faintly as she dragged it toward the row of benches, half fighting herself, half letting the storm inside lead. She sat, scarf coiled in her lap, fingers trembling as though it were alive. That's when she saw the signboard flash above the terminal desk, letters bold and merciless. The company logo. Her chest froze. The name was unmistakable, his name. She had sent her application there only days ago, desperate for stability, for one steady step after months of scraping survival. She thought it was just another faceless firm, a place to start again. But no, it was his. He wasn't just a man who had cheated, lied, and abandoned. He was the gatekeeper of her future. The scarf slipped from her lap to the floor. She bent to pick it up, but before her hand reached it, the stranger's shoes appeared in her vision. He stooped first, holding it gently. "Careful," he said, voice low, almost reverent. "Some things belong to more than just us." Her heart faltered. The scarf dangled from his hand, but his gaze lingered past it, toward the man she once loved. And in that moment, the story shifted again. The stranger's silence cracked just enough to reveal weight. "It was hers once," he murmured. "The little girl. His daughter. The one he lost." Her breath broke sharp, the room spinning. The red scarf, her talisman of pain, wasn't just hers. It carried another ghost, another absence. Suddenly every thread felt stitched with borrowed sorrow, layered grief. "Time can stop but never heal," her father's voice echoed in her mind. The watch at her wrist ticked faintly, circling back to that first night of betrayal. A loop. A cruel echo. Her chest clenched. The object she thought bound only her to him now bound her to a tragedy larger than her own. Did that absolve him, or condemn him deeper? She looked at him again, her former love, now laughing, kissing his wife's hand with a softness that felt stolen. Could a man carry both lies and losses and still stand so easily? Her throat burned with the impossibility of it. The suitcase at her side suddenly seemed heavier than steel. She knew now, this wasn't just revenge. This was survival. A point of no return. She stood, scarf still in the stranger's hand. For a fleeting moment, their eyes locked, his quiet recognition, her trembling resolve. Then she walked, not toward the exit, not toward escape, but toward the glass doors that led into the private lounge. Toward him. Toward the truth she could no longer keep hidden. And with that step, everything shifted. The lounge was quieter, almost reverent, as though the storm outside had seeped in and hushed every voice. The glass walls trembled faintly with rain, droplets racing each other down the surface. She stood just inside, scarf clutched tight, her suitcase dragging behind like a reluctant witness. He turned. The same tilt of his shoulders, the same half-smile that once undid her. But when his eyes landed on her, the smile faltered. For a heartbeat, silence stretched between them, time looping back to the first station, the first betrayal. Here. His voice was lower now, wary. After all this time? She swallowed hard, forcing air into lungs that resisted. Some truths wait, she whispered. Some burn longer than love. His wife looked between them, confusion already sparking in her eyes. The stranger lingered at the edge of the room, quiet, present but unintrusive, an echo of judgment, or maybe mercy. Her suitcase clicked open, hands trembling as she pulled out the envelope, the proof, folded and hidden for years. She laid it on the table between them like a wound exposed. His face tightened. "This doesn't change anything," he muttered, jaw clenching. But his fingers twitched toward the paper, betraying the panic beneath his calm mask. "It changes everything," she said. Her voice didn't rise, but it carried. "You lied. You cheated. And you thought the storm would bury it." The scarf slipped from her hand, falling onto the table. He stared at it, longer, heavier, before lifting it with a strange tenderness. "It was hers," he said, voice breaking. His wife froze, startled. "My daughter's. I kept it because it smelled like her hair the last day I held her." The weight of his confession crashed through the room. Suddenly the scarf was no longer hers, not really. It was shared grief, shared silence, a relic soaked in layers she hadn't known. Her throat tightened. The stranger shifted slightly, as if to remind her she wasn't alone. She felt his gaze like a mirror, she, too, carried silence. And then, the twist. He stepped closer, holding the scarf out, not to his wife, not back to the stranger, but to her. "You remind me of her," he said, eyes glistening, voice hollow. "Not because I love you still, but because you carry the same defiance. The same fire. That's why I can't let you disappear." The words cut deeper than lies. He wasn't choosing her, not for love, not for apology, but for the shadow of someone else. A replacement, not a redemption. Her hands shook, yet she did not take the scarf. Instead, she pushed it gently back toward him. "Keep it," she whispered. "I'm done carrying what isn't mine." The proof remained unopened on the table. She didn't need to destroy him anymore, she needed to free herself. That was the sacrifice. She turned, suitcase in hand, the storm waiting like a rebirth beyond the glass. The stranger's eyes met hers one last time, soft with unspoken respect. He did not follow. And as she stepped into the rain, she realized, not every stranger you help is meant to stay, but some leave you changed forever. The rain had thinned into a silver mist by the time she stepped outside. The terminal lights glowed behind her, blurred through droplets clinging to the glass. Each breath she drew felt different, lighter, though her chest still ached, as if grief had loosened its grip but left fingerprints behind. She walked without hurry, suitcase trailing softly, wheels hissing against the wet pavement. No one waited for her at the curb. No arms opened. But she did not collapse into the absence this time. She carried herself forward. The scarf was gone. She hadn't taken it back. And yet she felt strangely unburdened, as though by leaving it she had laid down the last stone pressing against her lungs. Back in her small room, much later, she placed the cracked watch on the wooden dresser. It no longer ticked, hadn't for a long time, but she didn't hide it in shame. She set it under the soft yellow glow of the lamp, like a relic of a storm survived. Not repaired, not erased, simply there. Her suitcase lay half open on the floor, emptied of its secret. The proof she once swore would destroy him had never left her hands that night, but she no longer needed to unfold it, no longer needed the paper to scream what her silence already knew. She slid it into a drawer, closed it gently. The sound was soft, final. As she sat by the window, the city stretched out before her, neon signs flickering, voices drifting faint from the street below. The stranger's face came back to her in fragments, the worn shoes, the photo of a boy, the way his silence had felt less like absence and more like recognition. Her father's words circled quietly in her head, altered now. Sometimes love is not romance, it's recognition. She whispered it into the dim room, letting it rest in the air like incense, slow and invisible, lingering even after it faded. She didn't know if she would ever see the stranger again, or if he was meant to vanish like rain drying on glass. But she knew this, her life no longer circled around his betrayal. It belonged to her again. The wound was not gone, but it had stopped dictating her breath. Outside, a bus rumbled past. She thought about getting on the next one, about leaving this city behind, about carrying only what was truly hers. Her hand brushed the watch one last time, fingers tracing the cracks. She smiled faintly, broken things still glowed under the right light. And as she leaned back against the chair, eyes half closed, the thought came clear, simple, unsettling. Sometimes the truth isn't meant to be revealed. Sometimes its power lies in who learns to live with it.